After my husband passed away, his children said, "We want the house, the business, everything." My lawyer begged me to fight them. I didn't. I said, "Give it all to them." Everyone thought I had lost my senses. At the final hearing, I signed every paper. The children smiled, until their lawyer suddenly went pale while reading. "I'm glad you're here. Stay with my story till the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached." The funeral flowers were still fresh. When they decided to crush me, I was sitting in Floyd's leather chair in his home office, the same chair where he spent countless nights studying documents and planning our life together. 22 years of marriage, and now I was expected to accept that the two men standing in front of me had the right to decide my future. Sidney, Floyd's eldest son, wore his father's death like a perfectly fitted suit, tailored for his own benefit. At 45, he carried the same authority Floyd once had, but none of the kindness. His steel gray eyes scanned me, with the cold focus of a businessman judging a failed investment. "Colleen," he said, his voice filled with the same disrespect I had endured for years. "We need to discuss some practical matters." Edwin stood beside him, 3 years younger, yet somehow looking older, with thinning hair and a soft, weak face. Where Sidney was sharp and calculated, Edwin hid cruelty behind fake concern. "We know this is hard," Edwin said, his voice heavy with false sympathy. "Losing Dad so suddenly has been difficult for all of us. All of us. As if they had been the ones holding Floyd's hand through endless hospital nights. As if they had made the painful medical decisions. They attended the funeral, of course. Sidney flew in from San Francisco, where he worked as a lawyer. Edwin drove up from Los Angeles, where he ran some unclear consulting business. But during the 3 months Floyd was sick, when it truly mattered, I was alone. "What kind of practical matters?" I asked, though unease had already settled in my stomach. Sidney exchanged a look with Edwin, a silent conversation shaped by years of shared secrets. It was the kind of look that shut everyone else out, especially me. "The estate," Sidney said plainly. "Dad's assets. The properties. The business. We need to decide how everything will be divided." My fingers tightened around the arms of Floyd's chair. The leather was worn smooth by years of his hands resting there. That familiar feeling brought me comfort. Floyd and I had discussed this many times. He promised me everything was arranged. "Well, yes," Edwin said calmly, as if I were missing something obvious. "Dad did make arrangements, but perhaps he didn't explain the full situation." Sidney pulled a manila folder from his briefcase and placed it on Floyd's desk, the same desk where Floyd kissed me goodbye every morning. For 22 years. Tomorrow I would find out what the key opened. Tonight I would let Sidney and Edwin enjoy what they thought was their victory. Martin Morrison had been Floyd's lawyer for 15 years. In all that time, I had never seen him look this uneasy, sitting across from me in his downtown office. His usual calm was gone. The professional mask slipped, showing real worry underneath. "Colleen," he said, taking off his glasses and wiping them for the third time in 10 minutes. "I have to tell you as clearly as possible. This is the wrong decision." Morning sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his 15th floor office. The Sacramento River sparkled below. Across the water, people were going about their lives, making normal, logical choices. I envied them. "I understand your concern, Martin," said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "But my decision is final." He placed his glasses on the desk and leaned forward, serious and focused. "You can fight this. The will. There are problems. Questions about Floyd's mental state when it was last changed. We could challenge it, slow probate, force Sidney and Edwin to negotiate." I had spent the entire night reading and rereading the papers Sidney gave me, trying to understand how my Floyd could erase me so completely. The wording was cold and distant. 22 years of marriage reduced to a few lines about adequate provision and reasonable arrangements. How long would a legal fight take? I asked. "Months. Maybe years," he said. "But, Colleen, you have a real chance. I knew Floyd. This doesn't sound like him. He spoke about you with love and respect. love, respect. Had I imagined all those talks where Floyd promised I'd be safe? That I'd never have to worry about my future? And during those months or years? Asked quietly, what would I live on? Sydney made it clear the medical bills are my responsibility. On 80,000, I said. Martin, even if I won someday, I'd be broke long before that. His jaw tightened. They're pressuring you on purpose. That's why you should fight. They're counting on you being scared or tired. He was right. Every instinct told me this was wrong. Floyd never meant to leave me with nothing while his sons took everything. But instincts don't pay hospital bills. They don't keep a roof over your head. What if, I said softly, I give them everything they want? Martin blinked. I'm sorry? What if I sign whatever they put in front of me? Give up all claims and walk away clean? He stared at me. You'd give up all your legal rights. How fast could it be done? I asked. He studied me for a long moment. Real concern showing now. If you sign full, release is a week, maybe 2. But why would you even think about this? I looked out the window again, watching. A small boat moved steadily through the river, guided by something unseen. Because fighting would break me, I said. Even if I won, I'd be bitter, exhausted, and empty. Maybe it's better to accept what's offered and start over. Martin leaned back, watching me closely. In 30 years, I've never seen anyone walk away from a 7-figure inheritance by choice. There's something you're not telling me. But I couldn't explain the certainty growing inside me since I'd found Floyd's strange key. All night I searched the house. Drawers, cabinets, storage boxes. Nothing fit. Still, the key felt important. Like Floyd trying to speak to me from beyond the grave. Maybe I'm just tired, I said. Tired of fighting. Tired of being painted as the greedy stepmother. Maybe it's easier to let them have what they think they deserve. What they think they deserve. Martin repeated sharply. This isn't about that. It's about what Floyd wanted. And this, doesn't reflect his wishes. Before I could reply, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Mrs. Whitaker, this is Edwin. Could we meet today to discuss the property transfer timeline? We want this to go smoothly for everyone. The politeness felt worse than Sydney's cold tone. At least Sydney didn't pretend to care. They're already moving, I said, showing Martin the text. His expression darkened. They're rushing you. Classic pressure. Colleen, please reconsider. Grieve first. Don't make permanent choices in shock. But I wasn't numb anymore. The fog that carried me through Floyd's illness was lifting. What remained felt like clarity. I couldn't fight Sydney and Edwin on their terms. But maybe I didn't need to. If I sign, I asked slowly, what exactly do I give up? Martin sighed. Everything. The house, Lake Tahoe, business assets, joint accounts. You keep only the life, insurance and property you owned before marriage. In return, they handle the medical debt. That mattered. At least I'd keep the full $200 instead of $20,000. Not security, but survival. I need to see the wording, I said. Martin opened his laptop. I'll protect you as much as I can. But once you sign, he warned, there's no undoing this. I understand. Did I? The key in my purse felt heavier. A reminder that Floyd left me something I hadn't yet found. My phone buzzed again. This time, Sydney. Mother, we appreciate your cooperation. Edwin and I hope to finish everything by the end of the week. Mother. He only used that word when he wanted something. They want it done by week's end. I said, of course, Martin replied. The faster you sign, the less you can discover. He leaned forward. Something isn't right. They're acting scared. You'll find something. He was right. Neither of them was ever this rushed. Maybe they just want closure, I said, though I didn't believe it. Or maybe they know more than you, he answered. Martin closed his laptop. One last time. Give it 48 hours. Talk to someone. I almost laughed. Floyd had been my best friend for 22 years. I don't need time. I said, I've decided. Martin studied me, then nodded slowly. All right, but everything will be in writing, medical debts, insurance timing, no future claims? Thank you. Don't thank me yet, he said quietly. I might be helping you make the biggest mistake of your life. As I left his office and crossed the marble lobby, I caught my reflection. Older but stronger, more solid. For 22 years I was Floyd's wife. Now I had to discover who Colleen Whitaker was without that role. Inside the elevator, I touched the key. Again. Floyd left me something. I knew it, and whatever it was, Sydney and Edwin didn't know. The key led to a safety deposit box at First National Bank on J Street. A box I never knew existed. For 2 days I searched the house, without luck. Then, in Floyd's wallet, returned by the hospital, I found a business card. First National Bank. On the back, a handwritten number. 379. The bank manager, Patricia, remembered. Floyd. She led me to the vault. He was very specific, she said. Only you and him. He opened it 6 months ago. 6 months ago, when his health began to fail. When those unexplained meetings started. The box was heavy. Alone in the room, I opened it. Inside were letters, emails, financial records, and investigation reports. At the top sat a handwritten letter from Floyd, dated 2 months before his death, marked, for Colleen. Read last. I reached for the next document. An email between Sydney and someone named Marcus Crawford, sent 8 months ago. And as I read it, my blood ran cold. Marcus, Dad's getting worse. Maybe 6 months. We need to speed this up. Can you move forward on the paperwork? The reply was worse. Documents are ready. Once he signs, the assets move to the shell companies. Properties transfer after death. What about the wife? She won't be a problem. She doesn't understand the business. By the time she does, it'll be too late. Dad trusts us. I read it twice before it fully sank in. They had been planning this for months. While I was taking Floyd to doctor visits, giving him medicine, and staying by his side, his sons were plotting. Not just against me, but against their own father. The next paper was a bank statement for an account I had never seen before. Whitaker Holdings, LLC. The balance showed $4.7 million. Below it was a note written in Floyd's handwriting. Colleen, this is our real savings. The boys think my money is tied up in the house and business. I moved most of it here months ago to protect us. $4.7 million. We weren't struggling. We weren't even comfortable. Floyd had been quietly wealthy, and Sydney and Edwin had been trying to steal from a dying man. My hands trembled as I picked up the next folder. It was labeled Private Investigation, Confidential. Inside were photos, financial records, and a report from a licensed private investigator named James Mitchell. The photos showed Sydney entering and leaving an upscale casino in Reno. The timestamps showed multiple trips, over the past year, sometimes lasting days. The financial records were worse. Sydney owed $230,000, most of it from gambling debts. Edwin's file was just as bad. His so-called consulting business was a front for failed investment schemes. He had lost nearly $300,000 of other people's money, including retirement funds from elderly clients who trusted him. Both sons were drowning in debt and legal trouble. No wonder they were so desperate for the inheritance. Then I reached the most shocking paper, a medical report dated 3 months before Floyd died. It wasn't from his usual doctor. It was from a neurologist I didn't recognize. The summary was short but clear. Patient shows no signs of cognitive decline. Judgment and decision-making remain fully intact. Sydney and Edwin had been telling people that Floyd was confused, that his illness affected his judgment. This report proved they were lying. Floyd was mentally sharp until the end. The last document was a will, not the one Sydney showed me. This one was dated 6 weeks before Floyd's death. It left everything to me, with small trusts for Sydney and Edwin that paid out slowly. Written in the margin in Floyd's hand. Original held by Mitchell and Associates, not Morrison Firm. My heart pounded as everything came together. There were 2 wills. The boys were using an old one, while the real final will was hidden with a different law firm. Why hadn't Mitchell and Associates contacted me sooner? Why was I only learning this now? With shaking hands, I opened Floyd's letter. "My dearest Colleen," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and the boys have revealed who they truly are." He explained how he grew suspicious when they suddenly became attentive during his illness. Not out of love, but greed. He hired the investigator. He moved the money. He planned everything to protect me. The boys think they're inheriting the house and business, the letter said. But they don't know I mortgaged both. The house had a 1.2 million Ashleen. The business owed 800. They're not inheriting assets, Floyd wrote. They're inheriting debt. I stared at the letter in disbelief. Floyd had handed them a trap disguised as a gift. "The life insurance is real," the letter continued. "But it's not $200,000, it's $500,000. The extra money is for you to start over." He also explained that Martin Morrison was never meant to handle the estate. He fired that firm 2 months before his death, but didn't announce it. The boys must have convinced him to represent the family after I was gone. Tears filled my eyes as I read the final lines. I know this seems harsh, but I couldn't watch them steal from you the way they steal from others. They made their choices. Now they live with them. You deserve better. Take the money. Start fresh. Don't look back. Love always. Floyd. Attached was a business card for Mitchell and Associates with a note too. Call immediately. I sat in that small room for nearly an hour. Floyd hadn't abandoned me. He had protected me. And Sydney and Edwin, the men who called me mother at the funeral, were nothing but thieves. But another thought made my stomach tighten. If they were desperate enough to steal from their dying father, what would they do when they learned their inheritance was pure debt? Would they come after me? I placed everything back in the box, except Floyd's letter and the business card. Tomorrow I would call Mitchell and Associates. But tonight I had dinner plans. Dinner with Sydney and Edwin. I would smile. I would listen. And I would pretend I didn't know they were about to inherit nothing. As I drove home, my phone rang. It was Edwin. "Colleen," he said warmly. "Bianca and I would love to have you over for dinner. Tonight. Some family time before we finalize everything. Family time. That sounds lovely," I replied calmly. "What time?" 7. "And thank you for being so graceful. Dad would be proud. Dad would be proud. If he knew what Floyd truly thought of his debt-ridden, lying sons. As I drove, I felt something shift. Inside me, the grief was still there. But now it was mixed with focus. Sydney and Edwin thought they were clever. They thought they rushed me before I could think. They had no idea their father was 10 steps ahead. And they had no idea I was about to be 10 steps ahead of them, too. Dinner was going to be very interesting. Edwin and Bianca's house in Granite Bay screamed borrowed success. Luxury cars sat in the driveway. A BMW and a Mercedes, worth more than most annual salaries. Now I knew how they paid for them. Bianca greeted me in a designer dress, worth more than my groceries for a month. Perfect hair, perfect nails, jewelry that sparkled loudly. "Colleen, you look wonderful. How are you holding up?" Her concern was fake, but I smiled. "I'm managing. Thank you for having me." Sydney waited inside, holding a glass of expensive scotch. The room was dark wood and leather, meant to show success, but now it looked like desperation. "Mother," he said, hugging me lightly, "you look better. I was worried after yesterday, when he told me I was broke and homeless." Edwin appeared with a glass of wine. "So glad you came. Bianca's been cooking all day, her famous herb-crusted salmon." The 3 of them circled around me, like perfect hosts offering drinks and snacks, complimenting how I looked, asking about my plans. It was a flawless show of family care. And if I hadn't spent the afternoon reading about their gambling debt and failed businesses, I might have believed it. Dinner was served in their formal dining room, with china that looked museum, worthy and silverware heavy enough to be weapons. Bianca really had done too much. The salmon was cooked perfectly. The wine was matched just right, and everything looked expensive and polished. "So," Sydney said as we started eating, "Martin Morrison called me this afternoon. He said you're ready to move forward with the estate transfer." I took a small bite of salmon, buying time. "Yes," I said. "I've decided that fighting over Floyd's wishes isn't how I want to spend my remaining years. Family. Peace matters more than money." The relief on Edwin's face was almost funny. That's wonderful, Colleen. Really wonderful. Dad would be so happy to know we're working together. We also prepared some papers," Bianca added, reaching for a manila folder that had been sitting on the sideboard. "Just to make everything official. Our attorney drafted them to go with what Martin is handling. Their attorney. Of course, they brought their own lawyer. I wondered if this attorney knew about Sydney's gambling debts or Edwin's fraud. How thoughtful," I said, not touching the folder. "But I should tell you, I've been thinking about the medical bills." The temperature in the room dropped. Sydney set his wine glass down a little. "Too hard. What kind of thinking?" he asked. Edwin spoke carefully, keeping his voice neutral. "Well," I said, $180,000 is a lot. I was thinking maybe an accountant should review the estate's cash before I agree to take that debt personally." Sydney and Edwin shared a look. The same silent communication I'd seen before, but now I understood it. They were worried I might find something. "Colleen," Sydney said slowly, "I thought we explained. The estate is improbate. The medical bills are separate from the inheritance." "Of course," I said pleasantly. "But Floyd was always careful with records. There must be paperwork showing exactly which debts belong to the estate and which ones are considered personal." Bianca laughed, a little too bright. "Oh, Edwin handles all that boring money stuff, don't you, honey?" Edwin nodded quickly. "Absolutely. Everything is properly sorted. The medical expenses fall to you because you were his wife and made treatment decisions with him." "That makes sense," I said. "But I do find it interesting that Floyd never seemed worried about medical costs. He always acted like our insurance was enough." The silence lasted a moment too long. Sydney cleared his throat. "Insurance doesn't cover everything, and Dad's treatment was extensive in the final months. I knew I was pushing, but I couldn't stop." "I suppose I should call the hospital," I said. "Get an itemized bill. See what insurance paid and what's still owed." Edwin's fork hit his plate with a loud clink. That's not necessary, Colleen. I already handled it thoroughly." "I'm sure you did," I said. "But as Floyd's widow, I feel responsible for understanding what happened financially. It's the least I can do for his memory." Bianca stood up fast. "Who wants dessert?" "I made that chocolate torte from Food and Wine magazine." She almost ran to the kitchen, and I didn't miss the look Sydney gave Edwin. They were shaken, and I had barely started. "Colleen," Sydney said, leaning forward, with what was supposed to look protective, "I hope you're not second-guessing our arrangement because someone said something. People who don't understand estate law can give very bad advice." "Oh, no," I told him. "I'm not doubting anything. I'm just being careful. Floyd always said the devil is in the details." Edwin laughed nervously. "Dad did love paperwork. He really did. In fact," I said, "I've been going through his office, and I keep finding documents I don't understand. Bank statements for accounts I've never heard of. Business papers for companies I didn't even know he had." The color drained from Edwin's face. "What kind of documents?" "Oh, nothing important," I said lightly. "Just confusing financial papers. Although I did find a safety deposit box. Key I'd never seen before." Sydney went still. "A safety deposit box?" "Yes," I said. "Isn't that strange? Thought I knew all of Floyd's financial plans, but I guess there were accounts and boxes I didn't know about. I should probably look into that before we finalize everything." The look between the brothers was pure. Panic. They hid it quickly, but it was there. "Mother," Sidney said, forcing his voice, to stay casual. "You shouldn't stress yourself over paperwork. Legal documents are confusing if you don't have a business. Background. Why don't you let Edwin and me review whatever you found?" "That's very kind," I said. "But I think Floyd would want me to understand our finances myself. I'll be on my own now." Bianca returned with the tort, her smile tight. As she served dessert, the talk moved to safer topics. Weather, Edwin's latest project, Sidney's law work. But under their polite words, I felt tension, like electricity waiting to snap. After dinner, as I got ready to leave, Sidney walked me to my car. "Colleen," he said, his hand on my car door. "About those documents you mentioned finding." "Yes. It would probably be best if you brought them to our next meeting," he said. "Let us help you sort out what matters and what doesn't." Dad's filing system was never very logical. I smiled at him, the same calm, polite smile I'd worn all night. "Of course, Sidney. Family helps family." But as I drove away, I saw him in my rearview mirror, standing in the driveway with his phone already at his ear. It was a call that couldn't wait. By the time I reached home, my own phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. "Mrs. Whitaker, this is James Mitchell from Mitchell & Associates. I believe you may have documents that belong to my office." "Mr. Mitchell?" I said, sitting down in Floyd's chair in his study. "How did you know I found them?" "Your husband was very clear in his instructions. If you accessed the safety deposit box, I was to contact you within 24 hours. Ma'am, we need to meet as soon as possible. There are things about your husband's estate you must know before you sign anything with Sidney and Edwin." "What kinds of things?" "Things that will change everything, Mrs. Whitaker, everything." After the call ended, I looked around Floyd's study, my study now, and realized the quiet game I'd been playing all evening was about to become very public. Sidney and Edwin believed they were controlling a grieving widow. They had no idea. Their father had been playing a far longer, far smarter game. James Mitchell's office looked nothing like Martin Morrison's elegant downtown suite. It sat in a modest building in midtown Sacramento with the warm, lived-in feel of a place where real work was done instead of appearances maintained. Mitchell himself surprised me. A soft-spoken man, in his 60s with kind eyes and hands that told a story of earned success. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said, standing from behind a desk that was organized chaos. "Thank you for coming so quickly. Please, sit. We have much to discuss." I sat in the worn leather chair across from him, my purse tight in my lap, Floyd's letter inside. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm confused," I said. "I didn't even know Floyd hired another attorney. He hired me about 8 months ago," Mitchell said, opening a thick file. "At first, it was only to discreetly investigate financial irregularities he noticed. As we uncovered more, my role expanded." He opened the folder. Inside were copies of many documents I'd already seen, along with others I hadn't. "Your husband was very thorough," he said. "When he realized what his sons were planning, he created a full strategy to protect you and ensure they faced consequences. The investigation showed they were stealing from him." Mitchell nodded grimly. "Sidney forged his father's signature on loan papers, using the family business as collateral for gambling debts. Edwin was worse. He moved client money into shell companies. Both face possible criminal charges if this becomes public." A chill ran through me. "Criminal charges, grand larceny, wire fraud, elder abuse. Your husband could have had them arrested," Mitchell said. "Instead, he chose something more creative." He placed another set of papers on the desk. "These are property records for the house and the Lake Tahoe villa. 6 months ago, both were mortgaged to the maximum. $1.2 million on the house, $800,000 on the villa." "But why?" I asked. "We owned them outright, because he knew Sidney and Edwin would inherit them," Mitchell said. "And he wanted them to inherit the debt as well. The money from those loans is safe in the Whitaker Holdings account. only you can access. My head spun. So they inherit properties worth about $1.6 million, I said slowly. But with $2 million in debt, they'll owe $600,000 more than the properties are worth. That's impossible, I said. They showed me the will. They showed you an outdated will, Mitchell said, gently. One replaced 6 weeks before your husband's death. The real will leaves everything to you. And if you choose, you may gift the properties to Sydney and Edwin. The choice is entirely yours. He handed me a copy. As I read, one line stood out clearly. I leave the decision of what, if anything, my sons Sydney and Edwin shall inherit entirely to my beloved wife, Colleen. Floyd left it to me, I whispered. He did, Mitchell said. And there's more. The life insurance isn't $200,000. It's $500,000. And there's another policy for $300,000 that Sydney and Edwin don't know about. $800,000, combined with the money Floyd had moved into protected accounts. I wasn't just safe anymore. I was wealthy. But here's the most important part, Mitchell continued. Your husband documented everything. Every forged signature, every fake transfer, every lie Sydney and Edwin told during his illness. If you choose to press criminal charges, there is more than enough evidence for convictions. The room felt like it tilted as Floyd's entire plan became clear. He hadn't just protected me. He had handed me the power to decide his son's future. What happens if I don't press charges? I asked, but also don't give them the properties? They get nothing, Mitchell said. They keep their childhood memories and their father's love. That's it. Meanwhile, they still face their existing debts and creditors who are counting on an inheritance won't be patient. Before I could answer, my phone rang. It was Sydney. Don't answer, Mitchell said quietly. Not yet. There's more you should know. The phone kept ringing. Something about. It made me uneasy. Finally, I answered. Colleen, Sydney said. His voice was tight, almost desperate. We need to talk. Something's happened. What kind of something? Someone from Mitchell and Associates called Edwin this morning. They claim to have documents that override the will we've been using. This is very serious. Colleen, we believe someone may be trying to defraud the estate. I looked at Mitchell. He was shaking his head, almost amused. Sydney, I said calmly, I don't understand. What documents? Legal papers that don't make sense? Listen, Mother, I think you should come to Martin Morrison's office immediately. We need to resolve this before you sign anything you might regret. The urgency in his voice said everything. They had realized something was wrong, and they were panicking. I'll be there in an hour, I said, and hung up. Mitchell leaned back in his chair. So, Mrs. Whitaker, this is the moment. What do you want to do? I looked down at the papers spread across his desk. Proof of years of lies, evidence of theft, and the foundation for my next move. I need to understand one thing, I said, slowly. If I give them the properties, with the mortgages attached, are they legally responsible for the debt? Yes, Mitchell replied. The loans transfer with the properties. They'd have 30 days to refinance or assume the mortgages or foreclosure begins. Given their debt and credit history, no bank will refinance them. They'll lose the properties and still owe the balance. I thought about dinner the night before, Bianca's designer dress, the luxury cars, in the driveway, Sydney's smug confidence, Edwin's fake concern. I thought about 22 years of being treated like an outsider, spoken down to, used, betrayed. But most of all, I thought about Floyd in that hospital bed, knowing what his sons were doing, still working in his final weeks to protect me. Mr. Mitchell, I said, standing and smoothing my skirt. I think it's time. Sydney and Edwin learned what choices really cost. As I drove toward Martin Morrison's office, my phone filled with frantic messages. Sydney. Mother, please don't sign anything yet. Edwin. Colleen. People are trying to take advantage of you. Bianca. We're family. Don't let outsiders come between us. Family. They still believed that word could control me. Family. But as I drove into the parking garage beneath Martin's building, I understood something had changed. For the first time in 22 years, I wasn't walking into a meeting as Floyd's wife or Sydney and Edwin's stepmother. I was walking in as Colleen Whitaker, a woman with $5.7 million complete legal, proof of her stepson's crimes, and the power to decide what happened next. The frightened widow they thought they were managing no longer existed. In her place stood someone far more dangerous, a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to protect. The conference room at Morrison and Associates had never felt smaller. Sydney and Edwin sat together on one side of the polished table, pale but trying to look confident. Martin Morrison sat at the head, visibly uncomfortable. James Mitchell sat beside me, calm, his heavy briefcase resting by his feet like a silent warning. "Colleen," Sydney began before anyone else could speak, "we're glad you're here. This whole situation has become very confusing and we need to clear up some misunderstandings." "What misunderstandings?" I asked, settling into my chair and folding my hands calmly. Edwin jumped in, his voice coated in fake concern. "Someone spreading false information about Dad's estate, claims about other wills, hidden accounts, things that don't make sense. We're worried that someone may be trying to take advantage of your grief." Martin Morrison cleared his throat. "Colleen, I'll admit I'm confused too. Mr. Mitchell says he has documents that override the will I've been working with. But Floyd never mentioned changing attorneys or rewriting his estate plan. That's because Floyd didn't trust you anymore," I said quietly. The room froze. Martin's face flushed, while Sydney and Edwin exchanged a look of pure panic. "Excuse me?" Martin said sharply. I opened my purse and removed Floyd's letter, the one from the safety deposit box. Floyd discovered that someone in your firm was leaking information about his estate planning to Sydney and Edwin. He didn't know if it was you or someone else in your office, so he took his business elsewhere. "That's impossible," Sydney said quickly. "Dad trusted Martin completely." "Did he?" I asked, locking eyes with him, watching his confidence crack. "Then why did he secretly hire a private investigator 8 months ago to examine your finances? And why did he move $4.7 million into accounts only I can access?" Edwin made a choking sound. $4.7 million? That's impossible. Dad didn't have that kind of cash. "Actually, he did," James Mitchell said, opening his briefcase and pulling out a thick folder. "Your father was far wealthier than you realized. He built that portfolio quietly over years to ensure Colleen's security." Mitchell spread documents across the table. Bank records, investment reports, property deeds. "The house you expect to inherit has a $1.2 million mortgage," he continued. "The Lake Tahoe villa carries $800,000 in liens. Your father took out these loans specifically so any inheritance would carry debt." Sydney's face drained of color. "You're lying." "I'm afraid not," Mitchell said calmly. "Your father documented everything, including your gambling debts, Sydney. $230,000 owed to creditors, and Edwin's fraudulent investment schemes which cost his clients nearly $300,000. "This is harassment," Edwin said, his voice shaking. "You can't prove this." Mitchell smiled slightly and reached for another folder. "Actually," he said, "I can. Bank records showing forged signatures on loan documents, wire transfer records showing embezzlement, recorded phone calls where both of you talked about manipulating your father's estate while he lay dying in the hospital." The temperature in the room seemed to drop instantly. Martin Morrison stared at the papers, the horror on his face clear. He looked like a man realizing he had been used completely. "Colleen," Sydney said, his voice now openly desperate. "You can't believe this. These are lies. We're family. We love you." "Family," I repeated, "like when you told me I'd get $20,000 after 22 years of marriage. Like when you gave me 30 days to leave my home Bianca, who had stayed silent until now, finally spoke. This is all a misunderstanding. We can fix this. We can make changes. Actually, I interrupted calmly, there's nothing to fix. The real will, the legal one, leaves everything to me. What Sydney and Edwin receive is my decision. I reached into my purse and took out another document. This is a gift deed I prepared this morning. I'm giving you exactly what you tried to give me. Sydney snatched the paper and scanned it. His face shifted from confusion to realization to fear. You're giving us the house and the villa, Edwin said slowly. But with the mortgages. That's right. You'll own properties worth about $1.6 million with $2 million in debt. That leaves you $600,000 underwater. Given your current financial problems, that feels appropriate. You can't do this, Sydney said. His voice was weak now. Yes, I can, I replied. It's exactly what Floyd planned. He wanted you to face the results of your choices. Martin Morrison finally spoke. Colleen, this is highly irregular. Perhaps we should pause and consider— No, I said firmly. I've considered everything. Sydney and Edwin can accept this inheritance or walk away with nothing. Those are the only options. And if we refuse? Edwin asked. James Mitchell answered calmly. Then Mrs. Whitaker will file criminal charges for elder abuse, grand larceny, and wire fraud. The evidence is overwhelming. You would both face serious prison time. The silence stretched on. Sydney's eyes darted as his mind searched for a way out. Edwin looked broken. Finally, Sydney spoke. What do you want from us? I want you to sign the papers and accept the inheritance as it's offered. I want you to agree never to contact me again, unless it's through lawyers. And I want you to understand this. This is what your father chose for you. Not because he hated you, but because you left him no choice. Bianca began to cry. This will destroy us. We'll lose everything. You should have thought about that, I said without emotion, before you started stealing from your dying father. Edwin looked at me, and for the first time I saw something close to respect in his eyes. He planned this, he said quietly. Every detail. Yes, I replied. Your father was far smarter than either of you ever realized. In the end, they signed. They had no real choice. The other option was prison, and even then they weren't ready to take that risk. As they left the conference room, Sydney paused at the door. This isn't over, Colleen. Yes, it is, I said calmly. It's completely over. 3 months later, I sold the properties Sydney and Edwin couldn't afford to keep, and moved to a peaceful cottage in Carmel overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The home cost $1.2 million in cash and still left me with more money than I could ever reasonably spend. Later, my attorney informed me that Sydney had filed for bankruptcy and was now attending court-ordered gambling, addiction counseling. Edwin moved back in with his mother and took a job as a night manager at a hotel near the airport. Bianca filed for divorce and relocated to Los Angeles to live with her sister. Sometimes, usually, in the evenings when the ocean fog rolled in, I would think about Floyd and wonder if he would approve of how everything ended. Then I would remember his letter, his careful planning, his determination to protect me even after he was gone. I believe he would have been very satisfied. The cottage came with a garden that had been neglected for years. I spent my days bringing it back to life, planting roses like the ones Floyd and I once grew, together creating herb beds and flower gardens that bloomed in thoughtful rotation throughout the seasons. The work was peaceful, fulfilling in a way that 22 years of managing other people's expectations never had been. For the first time in my adult life, I answered to no one but myself. I joined the local gardening club, took watercolor classes at the community college, and began volunteering at the animal shelter. Simple joys, but after decades of living for everyone else's needs, they felt revolutionary. One afternoon, while trimming roses in my front garden, a young woman stopped at the gate. She looked to be about 30, with kind eyes and a nervous smile. "Excuse me," she said. "I'm Sarah Mitchell, James Mitchell's daughter. He mentioned you might be interested in some volunteer work." I set down my garden shears and walked closer. "What kind of work?" I asked. "I help women leaving abusive relationships," she said. "Financial abuse, emotional control, that kind of thing. Dad said you might understand what they're facing." I thought about the frightened, confused woman I had been only months earlier, convinced I was powerless, dependent on the mercy of people who didn't care about me. "I might," I said. Sarah smiled. "Would you like to hear what we do?" As we talked, I realized Floyd's final gift to me wasn't just money. It was something far more valuable. The knowledge that I was stronger than I ever believed, smarter than I had ever been given credit for, and capable of protecting myself and others who needed protecting. 2 months later, I founded the Floyd Whitaker Foundation for Financial Justice, offering legal support and financial education to victims of family financial abuse. It wasn't the legacy Sydney and Edwin expected, but it was exactly the legacy Floyd would have wanted. Now I'm curious about you, listening to my story. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever faced something similar? Share your thoughts in the comments. And on the final screen, I'm leaving 2 more stories that are favorites on this channel, and I promise they will surprise you. Thank you for watching until the end.